It began on a quiet suburban morning in Ohio, the kind of morning where nothing unusual ever seems to happen. The streets were calm. The sun had barely risen above the rooftops, and most people were still inside their homes preparing for another ordinary day. Daniel Harris sat alone at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee slowly growing cold beside him. In his hands was a small envelope he had been waiting for, one he had almost forgotten about. A few weeks earlier, he had mailed a simple DNA test kit, the kind millions of people send every year to learn about their ancestry. He expected something harmless. Maybe the results would show his family came from Ireland or Germany. Maybe he would discover a distant cousin somewhere across the country. But what he did not expect was the message waiting for him when he opened his results. As he logged into the website and read the notification on the screen, his face slowly changed. The message was short, polite, direct. "Hello, I believe you might be my father." Daniel stared at the words in disbelief. For several seconds, he didn't move. Then he refreshed the page, convinced there had to be some kind of mistake. But the message remained exactly the same. According to the DNA testing service, he shared nearly 50% of his DNA with a young man named Ethan Whitmore. That level of genetic similarity usually meant only one thing: parent and child. But Daniel had never had children. At least none that he knew about. For nearly 20 years, he had lived his life believing his past was exactly what he remembered it to be. Yet somewhere out there was a young man claiming to share half of his DNA. And if that was true, then someone had been keeping a secret for a very long time. To understand how something like this could happen, we have to go back nearly 2 decades. Back then, Daniel Harris was a young man just beginning to build his future. He had grown up in a quiet American town where people believed in hard work, discipline, and maintaining a good reputation. Friends often described Daniel as focused and dependable. Even in his early 20s, he seemed to know exactly what he wanted from life. While others around him were still exploring different directions, Daniel had already decided on his path. He wanted a stable career, a comfortable home, and a life built on the same values he had been raised with. It was during this period that he met a woman named Sarah Whitmore. Sarah had recently moved into town to attend college. People who knew her at the time often described her as confident and ambitious. She carried herself with a quiet determination that made it clear she wanted more from the world than the small towns where she had spent most of her childhood. When Sarah and Daniel met, their connection formed quickly. They spent long evenings talking about their plans for the future. They explored the town together, laughed easily, and built the kind of relationship that feels exciting when two people are still discovering who they are. Friends noticed how naturally they seemed to fit together. But like many relationships during that stage of life, theirs didn't last forever. After several months together, the relationship slowly came to an end. There was no dramatic argument, no public confrontation. They simply drifted apart. Soon after the breakup, Sarah Whitmore left town entirely. For Daniel, the relationship eventually became just another memory from a time when life felt less complicated. He continued focusing on his career and building the future he had always imagined. What he never knew was that something had happened shortly after Sarah left. Only a few weeks after moving away, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. At first, she tried to convince herself that the signs were nothing more than stress. Starting over in a new city had been overwhelming, and she hoped the feeling would pass. But eventually, the possibility became impossible to ignore. One afternoon, she visited a small medical clinic hoping for reassurance. Instead, the doctor confirmed what she had begun to suspect. She was pregnant. For several minutes, Sarah sat quietly in the examination room, trying to process what that meant. The father could only be one person: Daniel Harris. In the days that followed, Sarah faced a question that refused to leave her mind. Should she tell him? Part of her believed he deserved to know, but another part of her feared what that conversation might bring. Daniel was already moving forward with his life. He had always talked about building stability, focusing on work, and creating a future that followed a clear plan. Sarah worried that revealing the pregnancy might disrupt everything he was trying to build. At the same time, pressure from family and friends made the decision even more complicated. Some believed contacting Daniel would only reopen a relationship that had already ended. Others suggested that raising the child independently might be easier than trying to rebuild something that had already fallen apart. After weeks of uncertainty, Sarah made a decision that would shape the next 20 years of her life. She chose silence. She never told Daniel about the pregnancy. Later that year, she gave birth to a baby boy. She named him Ethan. From the beginning, Sarah dedicated herself to raising Ethan on her own. She worked hard, created a stable home, and did everything she could to give her son a normal childhood. But as Ethan grew older, questions slowly began to appear. When he was young, those questions were simple. "Where's my dad?" Each time the subject came up, Sarah answered carefully. She explained that his father had once been part of her life, but was no longer around. It was an explanation that avoided conflict while protecting the secret she had chosen to keep. For many years, Ethan accepted that answer. But curiosity has a way of growing stronger with time. As he entered his teenage years, Ethan began noticing how easily other people talked about their families. Friends shared stories about fathers, uncles, cousins, and grandparents. Large parts of Ethan's own history remained missing. Still, life continued. School, friendships, and eventually adulthood filled most of his time. The question about his father remained somewhere in the background of his thoughts. Then one day something happened that reignited his curiosity. Ethan began seeing advertisements online for consumer DNA testing. Millions of people were using these services to learn about their ancestry and discover relatives they had never known existed. The idea fascinated him. At first, he imagined the results might simply reveal where his ancestors had come from. Perhaps he would find distant cousins scattered across the country. Eventually, curiosity convinced him to try it. He ordered the test kit online. When the small package arrived in the mail, the process seemed surprisingly simple. The instructions asked him to provide a saliva sample, seal the tube, and send it back to the laboratory. Ethan followed the steps and mailed the kit. Then he forgot about it. Weeks passed before an email notification finally arrived. "Your DNA results are ready." One evening, Ethan logged into the website and began scrolling through the information. At first, everything seemed ordinary. The report showed ancestry regions connected to different parts of the world, percentages of heritage from places he had never visited. But then he reached the section that identified potential relatives within the database. And that's when he saw the name, Daniel Harris. The match percentage was clear, 50%. Even without understanding the science behind genetics, Ethan knew what that number meant. The man listed in the report could only be one thing: his biological father. For several minutes, Ethan simply stared at the screen. After days of thinking about what to do next, he finally decided to send a message through the platform. He kept the words simple. "Hello, my name is Ethan Whitmore. I recently received my DNA results, and it appears we might be closely related. I thought it might be worth reaching out." Hundreds of miles away, Daniel Harris opened that message on a quiet morning. And in that moment, the past he thought was finished suddenly returned. After reviewing the DNA results several times, Daniel realized there was only one person who might know the truth: Sarah Whitmore. Finding her contact information took time, but eventually he located a phone number connected to the city where she had been living for years. When Sarah answered the phone and heard Daniel's voice, she was stunned. Nearly 20 years had passed since they last spoke. The conversation began cautiously, but when Daniel mentioned Ethan's name, the silence on the line grew heavy. Finally, Sarah admitted the truth. When she left town all those years ago, she had been pregnant. Ethan was Daniel's son. Soon Daniel and Ethan began communicating through messages and phone calls. At first, their conversations were careful and uncertain, as both of them tried to understand a connection that had remained hidden for so long. Eventually, they decided to meet in person, a quiet cafe halfway between the cities where they lived. Daniel arrived first and sat near the window, watching the door each time someone entered. A few minutes later, Ethan walked inside. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply looked at each other, noticing small similarities in posture, voice, and expression. 20 years of missed birthdays. 20 years of moments they never shared, all leading to this single meeting. Their conversation began slowly, with simple questions about work, family, and the lives they had lived separately. Gradually, the tension began to soften. They discovered small similarities in their personalities and the way they saw the world. But one truth remained impossible to ignore: those lost years could never be returned. In the end, the story of Daniel Harris, Sarah Whitmore, and Ethan Whitmore became a powerful reminder of how modern technology can uncover secrets that once remained buried forever. A simple DNA test had revealed a truth hidden for nearly 2 decades, and it had reunited a father and son who never even knew the other existed. But the story still leaves one question that continues to divide opinions whenever situations like this come to light. Was Sarah wrong for hiding the pregnancy all those years ago? Or was she simply protecting her child the only way she believed she could? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more.